In June 1996, horrible finds were made in the Aba River in Novokuznetsk. Parts of children's bodies and skulls were pulled out of the water. 2 days later, several more body fragments were found not far from this place. The city had never seen such a horrible crime. Based on the remains, forensic experts determined that 6 girls and 3 boys aged 9 to 14 had been killed. An investigative task force was formed from representatives of the prosecutor's office and criminal investigation departments of the cities of Novokuznetsk and Kemerovo and began working on several versions. The first assumption was made by forensic experts, and they came to an unambiguous conclusion. Such thorough dismemberment of the bodies could not have been carried out on the street. The children were definitely killed indoors, and then the body parts were thrown into the river. The examination also established that the crime weapon was a knife and a saw, and that the Ripper used them professionally. Who could have committed these terrible atrocities? The child hunter most likely chose his victims from dysfunctional families. According to the police, about 120 children were listed as missing in the city. Most of them ran away from home, unable to bear the cruel treatment of their parents. Hundreds of police officers and military personnel participated in the search for the criminal. They examined houses, forests, and parks, checked people with mental disabilities and dysfunctional families. But the children continued to disappear. 2 weeks after the terrible discoveries, 14-year-old Lina Saharova and 15-year-old Olya Nikitina disappeared. The police stopped cars with children in them. 10 people were detained. They insisted that they were private taxi drivers. The drivers were released and fined for not having a license. In search of the missing girls, police officers from Novokuznetsk checked dozens of apartments, basements, and warehouses where drug addicts gathered. The detainees were shown photographs of Lena and Olya, but no one saw the girls.
The next version was a lone maniac, but the kidnapping of children took on a mass character. Since the beginning of the summer holidays, 43 teenagers have already disappeared. It is unlikely that one person could have done something like this. The police also worked on the version of kidnapping. There were several Caucasian criminal groups in the city. But the detained Caucasians categorically denied any relation to the disappearance of children. Another version was that children were kidnapped for the purpose of subsequent transplantation of internal organs.
In Novokuznetsk, all hospitals, morgues, and the medical institute were taken under covert control. The personal files of all surgeons and pathologists were studied. The luggage of air passengers flying to Moscow and other large cities in Russia was also inspected with particular care. Customs officers carefully examined all items that could be considered containers for human organs, but they never found a single piece of evidence in favor of the organ transplant version. Only one thing was known about the criminal: he professionally dismembered bodies. The police asked for all information on registered hunters. Perhaps someone was particularly cruel to animals. The head of the operational search group, Semenov, noted that among the missing children, most often were girls named Elena and Olga. Moreover, they were all between the ages of 11 and 15. He assumed that the girls named Olga and Elena were victims, because of whom the rapist went to prison. Then Semenov suggested once again carefully working out the version of a repeat offender. In Novokuznetsk, all suspects were checked, among those who served time for the rape of minors. After a thorough analysis, Semenov turned his attention to the former driver and now butcher Grigory Gherkin. When they checked the accumulated information again, they discovered that Grigory Gherkin had already been detained during an operation to check drivers. At that time, he had 2 teenage girls in the car. The police began to follow the butcher. Usually, he went to the market early in the morning and returned home immediately after work. But one morning, Grigory Guchkin unexpectedly changed his route. The police did not have time to react. In the evening, Grigory Gherkin did not return home. And in the morning, the neighbors called the police and reported that a pool of blood had leaked from under the door of the butcher's room, and there was a distinct smell of decay. The operatives who arrived immediately broke down the door, but there was no one in the room, and several bags of rotten pork were lying on the floor. Grigory Guchkin was found in the evening. It turned out that he had been in an accident and had been in the hospital for more than a day. Each new murder in the city was attributed to an elusive maniac. There were rumors that this secret Satanist organization committed terrible ritual murders of children and homeless people. This version appeared when new unidentified remains were found near the cemetery. Soon, the detectives found the satanic sect. But it turned out that in Novokuznetsk it included students from one of the city colleges. The Satanism of the young people consisted only in wearing strange clothes and being fond of heavy metal music. While the detectives were dealing with the so-called Satanists, the carefully dismembered remains of 2 young women were found in one of the city's wastelands. The victims were identified by their preserved heads. Both victims had the same fatal name, Elena. But what surprised the detectives most was that they were not children. This means that the Ripper had switched to adults. The serial crimes of the elusive maniac excited Moscow. The Russian Minister of Internal Affairs sent experienced detectives from the Russian Criminal Investigation Department to Novokuznetsk. Hundreds of police officers checked every street, every house, all attics and basements. In addition, work was intensified at markets, train stations, and youth gathering places. Any information about similar crimes in the country was received and analyzed by the operational headquarters. Intense round-the-clock work brought an unexpected result. Many missing children were found alive and well, all from dysfunctional families. But the fate of 8 girls and 5 boys remained unknown. The children lived in the same area and studied at the same school. All the children disappeared without a trace on the same day, without returning from a walk. The only witness, a boy, saw them at a site where a residential building was being built. Detectives inspected all the premises and questioned the builders. This time, 6 schoolchildren from well-to-do families disappeared in the middle of the day in the city center. They couldn't have fallen underground. The police examined the underground utilities. But where could the Ripper himself have been hiding? The Ripper from Novokuznetsk eclipsed all known maniacs with his audacity and cruelty. He acted during the day in different parts of the city. Each time, several children became his victims. There were always no witnesses. But the practice of investigative work showed that all serial maniacs thought less and less about caution with each new murder. The headquarters worked around the clock, and the maniac seemed to have disappeared. But a few days later, emergency information came from the city of Tolyatti. On July 20, a 6-year-old girl, Polina Nikolaeva, was found strangled in a bunker on the territory of a former military unit. The killer literally tore the child to pieces. An employee of the Novokuznetsk Criminal Investigation Department was sent to Tolyatti to coordinate the actions. Based on the testimony of witnesses, a photo fit was made. The criminal is a man aged 30. Witnesses saw him together with little Polina. In the evening, the name of the killer became known: Oleg Rylkov. He had been wanted for 6 months on suspicion of raping girls. A few days later, a citizen was detained by a police patrol at one of the Togliatti markets while trying to sell a counterfeit banknote. He had no documents with him, but he confidently gave the name Yashchenko and his address. They took a written undertaking not to leave and released him. 2 days later, he was summoned to the police station. When Yashchenko came to the station, the police saw a completely different person. But he showed his documents and it really was Yashchenko. The officers described his features to him, and Yashchenko said that it was his friend Oleg Rylkov. It became clear that Oleg Rylkov most likely left the city. According to Yashchenko, his friend was planning to go to Novokuznetsk. This means that the unknown Novokuznetsk ripper was the touring maniac Oleg Rylkov. Photo fits of Rylkov were hung in crowded places in Novokuznetsk. Semenov urgently found out the details of Oleg Rylkov's previous crimes in the city of Togliatti. All the girls who suffered were between 6 and 13 years old. It is surprising that the children themselves opened the door for him when he asked for a drink of water, to call an ambulance for their grandmother, or something similar. He raped a child and robbed an apartment. The Novokuznetsk police department warned parents via television not to leave their children unattended. All areas of the city were divided into sections. Surveillance officers worked near schools, stores, and kindergartens. The police received several calls from city residents. They saw a man from a composite sketch, but these were only similar people. Despite the police's efforts, 2 girls, Olya and Galia, soon disappeared again. And then an emergency message came from Togliatti. Oleg Rylkov had been arrested. It turned out he had never left. Oleg Rylkov told about many crimes. He perfectly mastered the methods of breaking into an apartment without breaking in. The last time, he attacked 2 children in an apartment, and after torturing them, he hacked them to death with an axe. The girl died and the boy miraculously survived and was able to call the police. During yet another interrogation, a phone call from Novokuznetsk suddenly rang out. 2 days ago, 3 more girls disappeared in the city. And this morning, the severed head of one of them was found and identified. It became clear that it was not Oleg Rylkov who killed in Novokuznetsk. Detectives found out that 2 days before the terrible discovery on the vacant lot, 13-year-old Nastya and Zhenya and 15-year-old Olya, while being treated in the hospital, went for a walk. They did not tell any of the adults about this. After plastic reconstruction of the skin, the head was shown to the parents of the missing girls. One of the mothers recognized the features of her daughter Nastya with horror. Investigators checked all possible places where the girlfriends could have gone for their last walk. Semenov was suddenly informed that a criminal who had served time for raping children had reappeared in the city a week ago. This was a former school teacher, Sergei Hadin. His victims were girls named Lena and Olya. In reality, Sergei Karin had returned to the city at the beginning of the summer and had started working as a driver. The police had studied his routes and had assigned female police officers. They were supposed to introduce themselves as Olya or Elena. But the former prisoner behaved strangely. He would stop near girls who were hitchhiking, examine them, and drive away silently. In the end, he went home but suddenly stopped near one of the girls. She, as planned, got into the car. The car drove a few kilometers around the city. Then the driver and the girl went into a cafe and sat down at a free table. Karing ordered a bottle of wine, but the girl refused to drink. He began to insist, then the police girl tried a little wine from a glass. Then they drove somewhere again. Karin stopped the car in a vacant lot, and a few seconds later, a scream was heard. The police immediately detained the criminal, but the rapist still managed to injure the girl's hand. But he vehemently denied all charges of murder. Meanwhile, the police continued searching for the missing girls. In a store on Pionierskaya Street, a saleswoman identified the girls from photographs. They bought a bottle of water from her, and then the saleswoman remembered that an elderly woman had approached the girls and asked them for something. After which, they left together. She was a short, plump woman of about 60 years of age. They made a composite sketch. A female maniac is a very rare phenomenon in the history of forensic science. Rather, the woman could have lured the girls to a brothel where they could have been forced into prostitution, but why kill them? Although Nastya could have been killed to intimidate the rest of the slaves. The city immediately conducted a special operation on the drinking spots. But the detained prostitutes had never seen the missing girls in their circle. Then Semenov handed out the sketches to the police officers who worked at the stations, and one of them found a slight resemblance to Lyudmila Spesivtseva. She lived in apartment number 357 on Pionierskaya 53 and was remembered for constantly fighting with her neighbors because of constant water leaks and loud music. It was discovered that she had a son, Alexander, who was currently undergoing treatment at a psychiatric hospital in the city of Orel. The operatives immediately went to the apartment on Pioneer Street, but there was no one there. The police officer at the station was instructed to visit the apartment periodically. A day later, plumbers from the building maintenance department complained that they were doing maintenance on their heating system before the winter period, and the idiot from apartment 357 wouldn't let them in. He was saying from behind the door that he was being locked up because he was mentally ill. Semenov gave the order to urgently contact the hospital in the city of Orel and find out whether Spesivtsev Jr. was really undergoing psychiatric treatment there. An hour later, Semenov received a stunning answer. The patient, Alexander Spesivtsev, had already been discharged from the clinic 2 years ago. A group of police officers went to help a local police officer. He and a locksmith were trying to get into an apartment. The door was broken down and the police smelled a heavy smell of decay. But no one was found in the apartment except for a half-dead naked girl. And when the local police officer went into the bathroom, he almost fell over in horror. He had never seen anything like this, not even in a horror movie. In the bathtub, a piece of a teenage girl's body, limbs and body parts in a huge saucepan, internal organs in a bucket, a head on the lid. The girl was immediately taken to the hospital. She had a broken arm and a knife wound in her stomach. It was 15-year-old Olya who had disappeared a month earlier with 2 friends. She gave her first testimony at the hospital. The elderly woman had lured 3 girls into the apartment under the pretext that she could not open the lock herself. She asked for help. At that time, the police were looking for her son Alexander. He managed to escape along the roof of the building before they broke down the door to the apartment. Three days later, he was arrested near his home. During interrogation, he said that 5 years ago he fell in love with 17-year-old Zhenya Guselnikov. But soon Alexander began to beat her, after which Zhenya decided to leave her aggressive fiancé. Alexander Spesivtsev locked his fiancé in an apartment and beat and starved her for a whole month. According to the official version, she died due to sepsis. Doctors have not established the true cause of death. After this, Alexander Spesivtsev was examined by psychiatrists, diagnosed with schizophrenia, and sent for compulsory treatment to the city of Orel. After 3 years, the medical commission declared Alexander Spesivtsev healthy. He returned home to Novokuznetsk and began to take revenge for all the insults. Hatred became the meaning of his life. He often went to the station and talked with homeless beggars and local drunks. At the station, he met Elena Trunova and invited her home. Elena never left his apartment. A month later, another 22-year-old girl paid with her life. Her name was also Elena, and she recklessly accepted Spesivtsev's invitation. Neighbors were horrified to hear terrible screams through the musical roar, but they thought that these were the screams of a mentally ill person. After this, Alexander Spesivtsev turned his attention to the children. He saw children playing at a construction site and began to treat them to cigarettes. The builders did not pay attention to him. Alexander Spesivtsev suggested that the children rob the apartment. His apartment. After they entered the apartment, the children began to suspect something and screamed, but Spesivtsev stabbed each of them in the chest, then moved them all to one place and covered them with a rag. They lay in this state for 4 days. Then he took the corpses out into the corridor. A week later, Spesivtsev's mother Lyudmila came, and her son forced her to take out the corpses of the children, and he went to bed. The loving mother carried the remains of the children in buckets to the Aba River and threw them into the water. The bloody conveyor belt has started working, but Spesivtsev's mother was extremely careful, going out at night when the last lights in the houses went out. Therefore, no one could guess about the terrible secrets of apartment number 357, but one witness still survived. Why did they search for the maniac for such a painfully long time and detain him almost by accident? The fact was that, according to the documents, Alexander Spesivtsev continued to undergo treatment in a psychiatric hospital, but in fact, he returned home a long time ago. This small bureaucratic mistake cost at least 40 lives. On September 24th, Lyudmila Spesivtseva brought 3 girls to be torn to pieces by her son, Zhenya, Nastya, and Olga. That day, the girls ran away from the hospital to a disco, and before that, they went to the store for water. In the store, they met an elderly woman who asked them to help open the door of her apartment. She knew that the girls would never go to the dance again. Once in the apartment, the girls realized that they had fallen into a trap. The eldest of them tried to resist but could not, and Alexander Spesivtsev, in a rage, immediately stabbed her with a knife, hitting her several times in the chest. After that, he forced the surviving girls to butcher the corpse of their dead friend. The captives refused, and then he began stabbing them with a knife. When they were done with Nastya's body, the owner of the apartment calmly went to bed, and before that, he handcuffed the girls to the radiator. At night, Spesivtsev's mother, Lyudmila, as always, took out Nastya's remains. But she left some in a saucepan, cooked it, and forced the girls to eat her friend. Zhenya and Olya ended up in hell, where the owner's dog gnawed the bones of her friend before their eyes. Alexander Spesivtsev himself photographed the girls naked, and then, hearing that the captives were agreeing to escape, he went berserk and began beating them. Zhenya died from the beatings. The maniac forced Olya to cut the dead Zhenya into pieces, and his mother boiled pieces of Zhenya's body and forced Olya to eat this hellish soup. After this interview, the next day, Olya died in the hospital. How did it happen that in an ordinary house, an ordinary apartment became a bloody torture chamber for 20 people? But for exactly 20? Detectives found 40 gold rings, chains, and other jewelry in the terrible apartment. They also found 82 sets of bloody children's clothing. Not all of this clothing was identified by the parents of the missing children in Novokuznetsk. Detectives were especially shocked by photographs of 5-year-old children and tiny children's shoes. This story began 25 years before these events, when the Spesivtsev family moved to a new house. Lyudmila Yakovlevna believed that she had always been unlucky in life. The only joy was little Alexander. The boy was born underweight, he barely survived, and then was often ill. Until the age of 12, he slept in his mother's bed. Little Alexander Spesivtsev had a gloomy character, so he had no friends. His peers constantly offended him, and he dreamed that when he grew up, he would cruelly take revenge on everyone. His mother also hated them, these beautiful, healthy, and strong, unlike her son, children. When Lyudmila Spesivtseva, who worked as a school janitor, was fired for stealing plumbing, she got a job as a lawyer's assistant in court. Lyudmila Spesivtseva loved to bring home criminal case materials, especially photographs of victims and dismembered bodies. Together with her son, they looked at these photographs for a long time. Court cases replaced books for little Alexander. Moreover, he experienced a strange excitement looking at the photographs. And the mother, seeing her son's shining eyes, understood how good he was. She did not notice how her child turned into a beast. But she soon got used to it, and life did not turn into a nightmare for her. Even when Alexander tore 8 children to pieces in his apartment, and she mastered the new role of liquidating of traces of crime, carrying out butchered corpses at night. Soon, she herself began to enjoy it and became so involved that, wanting to please her son, she herself began to bring more victims to the meat grinder apartment. Lyudmila Spesivtseva realized that if her son did not kill anyone today or tomorrow, he would feel bad, and in the end, he could stab and dismember her. The Ripper's mother, Lyudmila Spesivtseva, was sentenced to 15 years in prison, and the Ripper himself, Alexander Spesivtsev, was again found ill and insane and sent for treatment until his next recovery. He is currently in a psychiatric hospital in the Volgograd region. Volgograd psychologist Tamara Proskuryaka recently visited the patient. Alexander Spesivtsev is trying to do everything to get out of prison. He does not argue, does not talk back, follows all the instructions, but does not participate in the local ensemble. In his opinion, songs and dances are for fools. The psychologist noted that the Ripper has sly, evil, beady eyes, like a wolf. Pointed ears, the devil can be played without makeup. At the same time, he looks young and well-fed. The maniac strictly monitors his health and hygiene. It also requires regular checkups with a physician. Spesivtsev is worried about his liver. He asks to constantly prescribe medications that support liver function for prevention. Spesivtsev is restrained in food, no overeating. It's harmful to the body. He wants to live a long life as a sadist. He very carefully monitors his daily routine. He takes walks in the fresh air in any weather. The maniac likes to read romance novels and the works of Ray Bradbury. Sometimes he writes poetry himself. Spesivtsev also receives a pension every month, although he has not worked a single day. Lyudmila Spesivtseva was sentenced to 13 years in prison and released from the Mariinsky Women's Colony in 2009. After her release, she and her daughter Nadezhda left Novokuznetsk. In 2013, the women tried to return to their apartment in Novokuznetsk under the cover of night, but the Spesivtsevs faced fierce resistance from the residents of the house. As a result, Lyudmila and Nadezhda Spesivtseva were able to get to their home only under the cover of police officers who helped the women bring their things. But they did not live there for long and disappeared in an unknown direction.
And what about the neighbors? How could they not hear and not see what was going on next to them? There are problems here too. Hello, police! Spesivtsev is acting up again, playing loud music. The neighbors kept calling the police, but listening to music is not normal. And no one came. At the beginning of the summer, one of the neighbors began to choke from the terrible smell of a corpse that was coming from the Spesivtsev's apartment. Police, please come and take a look. It's impossible to live like this. It stinks like a corpse. The music is blaring 24 hours a day. The neighbor asked the police, but no one came.
In 2024, this case is not over yet. Recently, we managed to find a man who, as a teenager, managed to get out of the maniac's apartment. The boy Victor left home after another scandal with his parents. He decided to spend the night on the playground behind the garbage chute in the house where a girl he knew lived. Coincidentally, her neighbor was Alexander Spesivtsev. The maniac soon noticed the boy and invited him to his house to smoke and listen to trendy music. The teenager agreed and followed the man. Once in the apartment, he decided that he would never leave it again, as the first thing he saw were the dismembered and still intact bodies of the first 5 victims of Spesivtsev. He doesn't remember how long the boy spent in the house. Too many years have passed since then, and stress has distorted time. The most vivid memory was the moment of escape. There was a peculiar smell from the remains in the apartment. At some point, the boy felt a fresh gust of wind and noticed that the front door was open. Without a second thought, he rushed to freedom and ran until he realized that no one was following him. Returning home, Vitya did not tell about the incident. He was afraid that they would not believe him, and the shock did its job. Soon, the boy was taken to another region, and he kept the secret until 2022. It was possible to find and interrogate the now adult man after the investigator began to compare the lists of missing children at that time and find out what had become of them. It turned out that Victor disappeared on the same day as the 5 children, whose bodies were later found in the river. He was extremely surprised that after so many years they found him and asked questions about that episode of his life. Then he experienced great fear, and even as a child, he understood that he might not leave Spesivtsev's apartment. When the 3 of us were passing by a store located near the parking lot where there are many kiosks, Grandma came up to us. She looked very old, gray-haired, small and thin. She turned to us for help, said that she had closed the door to her apartment and could not open it, and asked us to help her. We agreed. And on the threshold of my friend's apartment, I met the Spesivtsev together with my dog, a huge Newfoundland. The frightened schoolgirls implicitly obeyed the order of the maniac, who introduced himself to them as Andre, to enter inside, and found themselves trapped. The realization of this plunged Zhenya into hysteria. He immediately led all 3 of us into a room, told everyone to sit down, said that he hadn't slept in 2 days, and that was why he was angry. We all started asking him to let us go, but he said that now someone should come and look at us, and if it wasn't us, then he would let us go. He told us to sit quietly in the room, went out, came in again. Nastya suggested hitting him on the head with a bottle and running away. The bottle was by the bed. I said I couldn't. Then she decided to hit him herself. He came in, and as Zhenya continued to ask him to let us go, he said that he would now give her a sedative injection, brought a syringe with a yellow liquid, and took Zhenya by the hand. Nastya hit him from behind with a bottle, but hit him not on the head but on the shoulder. He took a knife with a button out of his pocket and stabbed Nastya in the stomach. She immediately sat down and started saying "don't." He stabbed her 3 more times in the chest and stomach. He grabbed the tights that were lying around and began to strangle. Grandma came in and asked. Alexander told her to leave, or else she would get hurt. He forced Zhenya and me to saw Nastya's corpse and put the parts in the tank and in the bathroom. Grandma cooked Nastya soup, and he fed us the soup. A dog was gnawing at the bones. He liked Zhenya, so he constantly raped her and beat me and often strapped her in the bathroom. Zhenya asked to kill her, but he replied that on the contrary, she would suffer and he would watch. Last Friday, when Alexander woke up, he began to rape Zhenya. She asked, "Don't," to which he replied that there was nothing to lose, she was going to die anyway. When he saw that I was awake, he told me, "Go fuck yourself," and I refused. He said he would put me in the bathroom. Actually, I used to sit there very often, and he would handcuff me there. On the same day, the newspaper with the television program disappeared. Alexander began to beat us, saying that we had stolen. He began to force Zhenya to walk. She couldn't walk anymore, and he started hitting her. He hit my head against the corner, kicked me, and strapped me in the bathroom. Then he came in and asked me if I could do artificial respiration. He unfastened me. Zhenya was lying on the floor and not breathing, but her heart was beating weakly. I gave her artificial respiration for about an hour, but she died. Alexander said that he liked her and needed her soul to go away, opened the window and did not touch Zhenya's corpse for 3 days. On the same day that he killed Zhenya, he raped me. 3 days later, he fed me fried potatoes and told me to cut Zhenya's corpse into pieces and put everything in an empty tank in the bathtub. Both the grandmother and the woman came and saw Zhenya's corpse. Alexander told his grandmother that all the parts of the corpse should be buried in one place. I don't know where or what parts she took. The maniac beat, raped, and doused the girl with water and passed an electric current. These tortures lasted more than a month.